Hey guys, welcome to Seller Sessions. This week we have Chris Guthrie. Chris, say hello, give us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. So I've been involved in the Amazon space for 8+ years now, and as an affiliate, and then also now more recently as a seller. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So you've got a background in software basically, haven't you? I know that you've been selling online for a while, but you've had some software businesses. I know I was introduced to you when I started out through AmaSuite, and now you've got SalesBacker. Do you want to give us a little bit about both of those?
Yeah, sure. AmaSuite was a tool that we built originally for Amazon affiliates,
Hmm.
because that's how I kind of got into building online businesses full time. Was I lost my job, and I had this income from the affiliate sites I was building at the time, and then so along the way doing this and building out affiliate sites, there were various tools that I either wanted to because that didn't exist or that had different functionality that we wanted to create. And so that was part of how we created AmaSuite. Then in 2014, when I started selling on Amazon, I thought, okay, we can take this tool, add some additional components like the pulling in the BSR, et cetera, and it'll be valuable for Amazon sellers. And so we did that with the tool. We added in another uh, app as well that was related to pulling in product reviews from the top 10,000 reviewers, which you can't do anymore. It's not effective. But that's what we did, and then we released that in December 2014. And then in early 2015, that's when we started with SalesBacker.
Excellent. So, which brings to the point today. So, today, guys, we're going to talk about email sequencing, and me and Chris are going to have a little bit of a chat about ways that you can optimize some improvements there, because we know that we need to stimulate for organic reviews, if you can call them organic. And so we're looking at today at the different approaches to email sequences. Some of this stuff you will know, some of it maybe not so. So Chris, let's kick off with the first question, which I think can be quite an important, depends on how you look at it. How do you determine the amount of emails required for a given product in your estimation?
Yeah, so actually, for the most part, we recommend about a 3 email sequence for most products. Some products people like to do maybe 4 emails, and some people prefer to just send two or just send one. But really, we always find effectiveness is best if you're sending, if you get, once you get to the point of where you're asking for something, as long as you ask for it twice, right? So your first email might be, hey, this is a product you just bought from me, and we're the company behind it, and we want to make sure everything's okay. So if you have any problems when it arrives, just contact us, and you have our contact information now. And so that's like the first email. But then once you get into your request, which is where you're asking for your product review or your seller feedback, if you ask for that twice, so in two separate emails, then that's going to get you better results. And so that's why the 3 email sequence is the most common that we see people doing. And then within that, people will change that sequence based on what they're selling. So if they're selling like a supplement, for instance, they're going to have that email delivered, later on in the process because they want people to have as much time as possible to start to see some effect from the product, right? Whereas other people that can just get something pulled out of the box and start using it, you can send those a little bit more close to when you actually deliver the product.
Cool. And so, with that in mind as well, Amazon also sends out their own emails. So, I suppose you have to be a bit careful of the placements. What is a good time optimization, would you say, to send in these 3 emails?
Yeah, and on that point too, the Amazon part, they'll send emails, but not necessarily for all orders. It'll just kind of, and also it will depend too on the user, right? So my co-founder for SalesBacker, he's never received a single email from Amazon when he buys something, but when he buys stuff now, he'll get emails from people using SalesBacker actually when he buys his various products on Amazon, and so he'll get those emails. So not everyone's getting those, but yeah, there are emails that Amazon can send to customers, and so yeah, it's important to keep that in mind. So the sequence that we typically recommend is, the first email, like I was saying, right after the product has been ordered, and it's just the customer service one. And then wait about 5 days to send your first request for your product review or your seller feedback. And then your final request, maybe 10 days later for a product review. Because you don't want to send too early, because if you send it too early, then they haven't even had a chance most likely to open it and start using it and form an opinion. So there's several steps that someone has to take before they'd actually be in this place where they want to write a review, right? And so that's the typical sequence that we recommend.
Okay, so we're looking after the order's completed or on delayed delivery of the order, would you say, the first one?
On deliver, so So the first one will be right after the order has been completed.
Yeah.
And then there's a delay from the time that Amazon actually, when an order comes in and then they report the order has been completed to the APIs that we use.
Yeah.
But then, so it comes roughly right after the time people have purchased the product. And then the other ones are based on like the delivery, right? So you can set based on different components, like whether the order was confirmed, shipped, or delivered. But most of the time, it's just the first email based on the order confirmation, and then the rest are based on delivery.
Cool. And so what would you say is the 5 key things or thereabouts that should appear in an email sequence for a customer?
Yeah, so really so I don't know if it's necessarily a 5, but I mean the main thing that you want to do is you want to really kind of put up front what you're emailing them about. So in your first email, it's like, hey, we're emailing you because you just bought this product. We're the company behind it, and we're here to make sure that you're happy with your purchase, right? So every email that you do kind of does that, right? So you're telling them what they're emailing about. You're saying why you're emailing them. You're providing good customer service, and then you're asking the customer for their feedback in the form of a review or in seller feedback, right? So that's kind of the final component. So I don't know if there's necessarily 5 there, but that's kind of the overall structure. You're trying to make sure that you tell them what, why, and making sure you give good customer service, and then following up with your request.
Yeah. So what we come on to next is, though, I'm imagining here is that copywriting plays an important part, and so does the writing style, because I think, and I don't know if you share this as well, is that you've got so many different ways to write copy. You know, you've got the kind of for the best word for it? You've got the kind of heavy sales, sleazy sales stuff. You've got the no nonsense, very short style. You've got the wrapping people up in cotton wool. I mean, what have you seen is generally been working across the board, or do you find it's more related to the product? So it's more masculine for a man product, or it's heading for women, so it's a bit more cuddly. What was your take on this?
Well, that's the interesting thing is that it's a lot of those different components. Like it can really depend on what people are selling. I do think that the interesting thing is we're not able to see like aggregate statistics across like what people's campaigns are than how effective those campaigns are. It's more like anecdotes that we see when people post in their Facebook groups and they talk about what they're doing with their sequences or when they report to our customer service team. But it's true though, right? When you're thinking about email copywriting or just copywriting in general, there's a lot of different styles you can go with. When it comes to selling on Amazon though, you have to rule out like the sleazy one, right? Because if you do things that are shady, then you just get in trouble, right? Because your competitors can buy your products, see what your email sequence is, and then see, oh, okay, you can't do that, and then try and report you to Amazon, right? But if you're just focusing on adhering to the rules, then that wouldn't be a problem, of course. So a lot of the times people are just using the default sequences that we add to people's accounts when they first sign up for SalesBacker, but then they just kind of tweak them to fit the product that they're selling, right? So if it is something that's more masculine, then they might add that type of a tone to it. Or if it's something where a humor approach can fit, then that's something you can do as well. But the biggest thing is really if you're trying to go with more of a personal approach, I find that generally speaking across all of the people that I've talked to and the sellers that I see sharing their results, those tend to work better, right? So if it's something where you're in fact a family-owned business and you say we're a family-owned business and we appreciate your feedback, that type of a feel is more personal in nature than a typical email you might receive from a huge like Fortune 500 company when you buy something, and it's just like this glitzy, glamorous style email that isn't necessarily isn't really personal at all, right? It's much more like polished and the word I'm thinking of. But I guess the main point is that if you're going with something more personal in tone, you can have good results, right? And that's why we like to do like the text specific approach as opposed to putting in images and all that. So really it just kind of depends on the product, how you're trying to put yourself across with the brand that you're trying to create. But even as I'm saying some of this, right, you don't have to necessarily overthink it that much. If you're sitting there and like, I just need to get started, then just use the default campaigns. You could always change it later.
Yeah, no, I think, and obviously I think that happens with a lot of softwares. There are default templates to help guide the end user, aren't they? And then they can obviously make the adjustments themselves. But I think the other thing we kind of touched on this before we got started, but the types of words you should include and what should be avoided. And I think that plays an important role because language and tonality is different to what you'll get as a human in front of, speaking to the person where they can hear the tone of the voice and everything else. And I think sometimes is what people, the way that they write, they have to be careful because it could actually be that they're being quite negative without intentionally being negative. What would you say is the better or the best approach you've seen towards writing, and is there any key words that people should not be using in their mouths?
Yeah, I definitely think it kind of goes back to that what I was saying before about going with a more personal type approach in the emails that you write. But in terms of words to avoid, the stuff that I would suggest in terms of avoiding is more related to things that relate to Amazon's rules regarding their terms of service and their customer communications and buyer-seller messaging guidelines, all those different types of things. So things like, for instance, if you like this product, click. Well, I guess maybe we're kind of getting into a whole different topic here, but there aren't necessarily specific words that I would suggest avoiding unless they're those words that relate to potentially violating Amazon's terms of service. To put it more simply.
Yeah. So something like being presumptuous, like we look forward to your 5-star review, is coming across quite arrogant, isn't it? So things like that need to be avoided, along with being against TOS to actually state that. But I think what I'm trying to say is I think people can write information, don't realize that they're being negative in any way. Like they could write something more like a statement whereby they say, if you hate our product, then please, contact us directly and we'll resolve it. It's just using things like hate and dislike. There's certain words that you can actually make, you can actually build a campaign and literally throw a hand grenade at your business if you're not careful. But that's not your intent. It's just the way that you write. So how would people get around situations like that? What would you advise people? Is it to share the content for other people to read, to understand the tonality?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I guess if that's a struggle, I think that avoiding those types of things should be somewhat straightforward. But if certainly if it's someone that's first getting started and they haven't really dealt with customers in the past and how to communicate with them, then if you use just the language that we use in our default campaigns is fairly neutral, right? So if you're just thinking, all right, this is the baseline, then I want to push it just a little bit more in this direction, and then look at the way that we've structured them there, then that's kind of like a baseline that you could use. I don't know if I necessarily have like a specific than that in terms of how people could change their communications, but it's really just comes down to trying to figure out what your brand is about and the way that you want to communicate with people, not only through your website you set up for your company, but then also translating that to the emails that you put across. And so certainly something that's more upbeat and not like negative would work well, unless you're like a company like Cards Against Humanity, where the negative approach is like the thing that you do, and the people are like to see that, right? Where I think I've read where they'll basically just be insulting to their customers, but then people love it because that fits like their game, right?
Yeah, totally. So what about increasing, like we know that they're Amazon's customers, we've got these free emails to make the impression. What would you say is some good techniques to use to increase the customer engagement? You want the customer to speak to you if there's a problem, and there's means and ways of doing that. How would you encourage that? At the beginning of the email? Would it be something that you put in at the end? How would you play that?
Yeah, so the most common is just you're trying to get them to take action, right? So if you're saying, hey, do you have 2 minutes to spare, or do you have 30 seconds, right? If you do, can you leave us a product review, right? That type of an approach where you're asking them something, but then also at the same time giving them an expectation of that time it will take for them to do what you're asking. It's certainly better than saying like, do you have 5 minutes to spare, or do you have 10 minutes to spare? Because people are busy and for the most part, they're not really that interested in doing anything, right? So that's the one thing to keep in mind, is that especially this is something that people that are just getting started miss, is that no matter how great your email is and how awesome your product is, over 50%, 100%, over 50% of the people that get those emails won't even open them or do anything with them, right? Because it's just an email and people get a lot of email, and that's just how it is, right? You're looking for just in aggregate hitting a lot of people, and then a percentage of those people are going to actually do something. So during that email, though, I think setting an expectation as to what you're doing, and that's really where you do that more the later part of the email. The first part is always like making sure they're happy, and that you've satisfied their needs with the product that you're doing, and making sure there's nothing wrong with the product. And then you're going into the request for a review or seller feedback.
Which brings us on to another key aspect of people opening the mail is subject lines. So can you give me an example, maybe 2 or 3 examples of what a good subject line is and what it should contain?
Yeah, actually, I'll use some of them from our default campaigns, because I wouldn't want to like use stuff that people have mentioned specifically in Facebook groups or just to me personally. But I'll use those, and I'll kind of share why we use them in that way. So one email, this would be from like the first email from like our, we have an email campaign called the Review Maximizer, and that's like a default campaign that's preloaded. So like the first email would be, thank you for your product name purchased. And then that would be replaced with whatever they purchased. And so it's important to incorporate some sort of personalization. And by doing that, with replacing the product name with what it is that's being sold, it's something that someone's going to see when they scroll through their inbox that, oh, okay, I remember buying that, so let me check that out. And it's better than just saying thank you for your purchase, right? Because sure, they might know they bought something recently, but it's not as related to the item that they specifically sold. And then that's also setting the tone of the email as well, right? That you're trying to provide good customer service, and that's why you're sending them a thank you email. And so that's kind of the way the subject line fits with the rest of the body copy for that email. Yeah. And then the follow-up emails would be, how is your product name working for you? And then, so again, you're having that personalization. And then that you're starting with a question, right? So when you use a question, it's something like, well, okay, I want to tell people how it's working for me. Is it working well, or is it not working well? And then if they have that thought process that it's not working well, then when they open the email, again, when we structure the way it goes out, your first portion of the email is making sure everything's okay. And if it's not, then that person can then contact you. And then continuing on down further, it's then going into the request for product review. And then the third email will be, help others by writing a review of your product name. And so this is then putting in the approach of less about yourself and more about, hey, when you write reviews on Amazon, then it helps millions of other shoppers like yourself make good buying decisions. And so that's kind of the appeal to the collective, as opposed to just we as sellers, right? And so that's the 3 different approaches and kind of the psychology behind them. But then, of course, if people wanted to adjust that or change it based on what they're doing, then that can work well. I would suggest, and again, this kind of goes back to what you're saying before, like when you have these, when I think of like doing emails through in other businesses outside of Amazon, I think of like just some of the bizarre subject lines I've tried in the past that have worked really well. But then I think, okay, in the context of Amazon, they don't work as well. Because you want to make sure that you follow the rules, but also that it's not too over the top. And so anyways, I think those are like kind of good baselines and some of the psychology behind why they're structured that way. And then that might give people ideas for how they can do similar things, even if they end up with something completely different. It gives them kind of the reasoning behind it, though. Yeah.
No, I've always found that 3 to 4 words max and a question mark generally works quite well. Obviously, you've got to nail down the congruency of the content, but I found that approach worked quite well in terms of open rates and stuff like that. So going back onto the mail sequence, is there any that you've seen that may be a little bit different? Like so you can not follow the crowd, but you have a structure, it's pretty safe to do that mail sequence. Have you seen any outrageous mail sequences that have worked really well at all?
Nothing is coming to mind because, like I was saying, sometimes if it's something that people have shared in confidence and it's not something I can really talk about specifically. Yeah. But it's more like, it's tough to say because even thinking about like what you said, mentioned, like using 3 to 4 words in a subject line. I agree that some of that shorter style works well. And I think that for the Amazon marketplace, shorter emails in general are better than doing like a really long essay.
Yeah.
Now, if you're like a blogger and you've developed this relationship with your audience and they know you very well, the long emails can perform exceptionally well and sometimes better than short emails. But when it comes to Amazon in general, I'd say short emails work better. And so I guess, so again, I don't have anything specific, I guess, but it's more just the setting that in mind, right? That when you're selling on Amazon, for the most part, even if you're selling something that's like a repeat purchase, people don't have like a super strong relationship to you yet. And so going with something that's shorter and more to the point and kind of covers those things I was talking about before would work well.
Yeah, no, totally. I suppose we'll get into testing a bit later, and we can discuss short form versus long form and stuff like that. Where do you think we are at the moment with the terms of service? Because I think, as someone who owns a software sequencing company, it must be at the forefront of your mind. Your customers are always saying, well, what can we say? What can't we say? And you can only go so far by reading Facebook groups and stuff like that. At the end of the day, if you rely on what's written out there rather than from the voice of Amazon, it's going to make it difficult to not trust the information, but you're in a position where you need to, like other companies, you need to provide the right information. So where are you at the moment with wording wise? What can be said? Like, the goal is to get reviews or get feedback. We'll move on to feedback in a minute. But what are the words we can use for reviews or asking for reviews, and what can't we do?
Yeah, definitely. So this is probably a longer conversation. If I go back to like one of the first things you said about it being at the forefront of my mind, it is something that I always think about, right? And I think back to when we first started the company in 2015, early 2015. There were things that when we were designing our original email campaigns that I was like, we could do this, and I know 100% it'll be effective, right? Yeah. So for instance, like the idea that, and you've probably seen some of these emails now where people say, would you like to leave us a review? And it's like, yes, I would like to leave you a review, or no, I didn't like your product, right? Where it's like a yes, and then that yes links to a product review link, and then the no links to like seller feedback.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's the type of stuff that, like, very early on, I was like, this will be super effective. It'll work really, really well. Yeah. It'll help prevent people from getting negative reviews, and it will send those to seller feedback. Yeah. But we didn't include those in our default campaigns because we knew that if it wasn't something that Amazon was going to do, we knew that in the future Amazon would not like that, right? And then sure enough, they've kind of come out with that, not using buy, and so that'd be like one example, right? Is to not do that.
I've got a confession to make. I actually, up until recently, I had the happy face, the smiley face, and the sad face doing exactly that. And then as soon as the update came, I think Cynthia Stein wrote a post on it. There was a big thing happened a few months ago. Instantly, that was shut down. Yeah,
yep. And that's the thing is, right, is it's like all these things that, again, if we were outside of Amazon's playground and we were, building our own email lists outside of that space, which is, again, is a reason why people should be doing this as well. But, if we were outside of that, then that's definitely something that we would have been doing, right? From very early on. There's a lot of things that we would do, but instead it's like, okay, where's Amazon at today? Where are they likely to go, right? And that even leads us to, like, if we go back to like October of last year, 2016, when the whole incentivized review update came in, that didn't really affect us too bad because the reviews that people are getting from SalesBacker are just, they're organic from customers that usually aren't leaving reviews. But it's like, I definitely saw that type of thing happening. Like, I could see that was would be something that Amazon would change and say you can't do anymore. And then overnight that like shut down a lot of these companies that were basically just helping people get incentivized reviews. And so in general, we're not only trying to look at what is it today, but then also what will it be in the future based on their actions of the past, and also just based on what would we think Amazon would like to do. Because in a lot of cases, we're getting the same information that you are when we see these updates, because Amazon's so massive, they don't really, it's like they just kind of do stuff and then people have to comply, right? Yeah. But anyways, I'm kind of getting down a tangent here. So stuff that you shouldn't do is like, using bias in your language, and just look at the emails that you've constructed already. You can look at like the default emails that we've done. And again, you can use that as like a basis for how you can construct your own email if you want to write something custom. Because everything's very much like, 2-minute favor. If you'd like to leave us a review, you can do it here. Here's a link, right? And then it's not like, if you'd like to leave us a review, only if you're satisfied with this product, here's a link.
Yeah.
And so bias is one of those things. What else am I thinking of here?
So no 5-star review, and like a screen grab of a 5-star review to click here. Like, even though you're not saying give us a 5-star review, I've seen email sequences where it's literally 5 stars is the icon that you know, it's the graphic that you click on to kind of lead you in that direction.
Yeah, and some of our competitors have had added some features like that, and it's like, it's frustrating because people will ask us then for those types of things to be added, and it's like, well, it's sort of like we could give people the rope to hang themselves with, right?
But you're being responsible is what you're looking at. Yeah.
We don't want to do that, right? And so if that costs us some business, then that's fine, because in the long run, then when these updates occur, it's not like we're running around and we've got to change our company or do anything else like massive to change things. So that's one thing. I guess another thing too is, and this kind of is somewhat related to bias. You don't want to trick buyers only into leaving positive reviews, because again, Amazon, and this kind of comes back to, when was that? Oh yeah, it was that video, the October video where I think it was in September actually, where they analyzed like 25 million reviews. You might have seen this video. And I remember I saw it, went to the front page of Reddit, and they saw that reviews that had this product was left in exchange for an honest and unbiased review, that type of thing. They found that in the fact that did have some bias. It was like 4.73 stars on average, as opposed to 4.33 for reviews that didn't have that. And then as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh great, Amazon's going to update this. And then sure enough, in October they did. Another stuff here. Here's another good example. Don't do like shady things like offering refunds or doing coupon codes if they leave a review, or even just in general, right? So don't offer like
and incentivize. Which is good. Yeah, I was going to ask you the question. What do you do when let's just say that you're doing a bit of you're doing a giveaway. So you're giving away, you're discounting the product. And it just so happens that with the discount codes that you're sending out, that person is caught into the email sequence and you ask them for a review. Where does everyone stand there in your book?
So that's the part where it gets into that gray area where we only roughly know what we think, but it's tough to know because Amazon, they're not going to come out, just like when Google doesn't come out and say what their ranking factors are and which ones you should pay most attention to. Yeah. It's the same thing with Amazon in that regard. So they don't share like, okay, at what cutoff point with the discount does it become a problem, or how many reviews with relation to the rest of the reviews that you get does it become a problem. And so really what it comes down to is in SalesRack, we have an option where you can just check a box to not send emails out to people that get a coupon code. So if you do a huge promo, you can just go into your campaigns, check the box, and then if you can just avoid sending those emails to those people, that's then the safest approach. But if you're trying to make sure you get some of those people, then you can just let them through. If you look at what Amazon's specific guidelines say, I don't have it exactly in front of me right now, but there's a section where they say they don't want you to try and inflate the bestseller rank or something to that fact, right? Where they don't want you to artificially inflate that.
Stimulate.
And so then, exactly, right? And so they're basically saying they don't want us to do what every seller on Amazon's trying to do, which is to get sales and then get rankings and all that. But I think of it more of like if you're really over the top, right? So if it's like, okay, you have 50 reviews right now and you give away 1,000 units or trying to do 1,000 units to get like 200 more reviews, then that's going to cause some problems as opposed to less. And so that could be also why in general, I think it's better to do more regular, consistent types of giveaways and pushes as opposed to like just huge blasts. But this is also kind of now getting to the territory where I don't know it as well, right? Because we don't have like a launching platform or anything like that, or like some of these other companies out there have, where they're more entrenched in seeing what's working and what's not working. But so I guess where I would stand is that if you think it's a concern, then you're probably right, and you might be right that it can be a concern. And the safest bet is to just check the box to not send out emails on those coupon code things, and you can always just turn that back on if you have like a regular 20% or 10% coupon just that's offered through your listing when people buy a couple different products together, for instance.
Yeah, I was going to say is another thing that it just popped into my mind now is that when people, this is about launching, but it leads back into the sequences, is that when you're starting out and you're trying to gain rank, a popular thing that people do is drop the price below market rate and then turn on the PPC and run it into the red. So they're getting the visibility. They've obviously got a great product. They're looking to stimulate the sales. They sell at a low price. So let's just say the average price on that page is $19.99. They may sell at $12.99, where they're selling at a loss and they're bidding in positions 1, 2, and 3. And then they're looking at gaining reviews that way. So what would you do in that situation in terms of your sequence? Would you have maybe a different approach to your free mail sequence?
It's tough to say. I mean, you could do something like you bought during our initial launch or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Something where it's like, hey, we've discounted the price below. But then even as I'm saying that, like I'm thinking about how it can be misconstrued. I don't see a lot of people changing their sequence for those types of approaches, but I can see how there would be value there.
Yeah, because you
and
see
then
where
also
I'm coming. What I was going to say is that where I'm coming from is that the free mail sequence that we've just been discussing, let's just say that is generic. That's your everyday, I've got a product I'm selling on Amazon. But there's a point where you've got, when the product's working, that sequence works quite well. But what about your launch sequence? Because you're selling a product below market rate, but you're not necessarily using coupon codes here, because all you're doing is just pricing it at a low rate. Do you know what I mean? Where I'm coming from. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to articulate that. And then what happens is when you stop discounting and you're chasing the initial reviews, you can go into that kind of steady free sequence.
Yeah, so I mean that's a good point, right? And this is kind of where it's getting into that area where I don't know where the future may lead. Maybe they wouldn't like you to say things like, "Hey, you bought during our launch month. Thanks for purchasing our product. We're new to selling on Amazon. We really appreciate your feedback." That type of approach may get you a better results, but then it's like I don't know for sure if that's something that they would be against in the future. But for now, it doesn't seem like that would run into really any issues, perhaps. So yeah, I think definitely if you wanted to do something different where you're doing that, you're running like as much volume as you possibly can through your PPC, and you're dropped your price to try and get as many sales as you can to try and help start ranking for more keywords. Then yeah, I think that using a different style of email sequence or different content that you could just change afterwards could work. How and what specifically you would say, beyond what I just shared moments ago, I'm not really sure what else you would do off the top of my head. But yeah, I think that can make sense as a strategy.
Cool. We touched on this just previously, but we're talking about plain text emails against images for your sequences. What have you seen to work well? It's nice to have a nice graphic and stuff like that, but is there a situation where maybe plain text works better in image, or image-driven emails work better in plain text? What's your take on that?
So we built our default campaigns around the approach of the more personal style email, and doing something that's more plain text in style is going to be different than the typical emails that customers are seeing. And so then just by that very nature, they're going to be a little more apt to actually do what's in those emails, or to take action in some way. And so that's definitely the approach that we prefer, and that's what we've seen that's worked well for people. Then if there's people that prefer like more of a rich HTML type experience, then we have an HTML editor, so people can do that. But if I were to bet on one, I think the plain text style and more of a personal approach works really well, because in a lot of cases, vast majority of sellers on Amazon, as with anything, right, they're smaller companies. And so they're smaller businesses. And so that personal style and tone can work well for them because it really fits where they're at with their business. The larger companies, maybe they start to shift that a bit. But for the most part, that's what works well for those smaller companies. So
cool.
So I'd say the plain text style.
And so would you say that as well, that maybe if you do mix it up a little bit and there is a bit of HTML in there, I've seen campaigns where people may be using the Amazon style fonts and colors just to dress it to make it look more like Amazon, or would you go against that and so that it's very clear you're separate from Amazon?
It's tough. I mean, I haven't seen that too often actually myself. I would suggest, and that's kind of where this is just kind of a judgment call, right? Because I don't know for sure. All I can really say is, if it feels like you're trying to
Manipulate
to look like you're Amazon, then that looks probably bad.
Yeah. Okay. No, I was just throwing it out
but
there.
But it's tough to say, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing that about Amazon. That's why it's kind of sometimes fun, and sometimes people pull their hair out about it. But it's like we don't know what they're thinking, and so you just kind of have to go with what your gut is and what you think makes sense for your business, and to not be too shady about it, I guess.
Yeah. No, all I'm trying to do is, for our audience, there's all those little nuances make a difference, but like we've discussed, is that we're looking at things that you're as your business, and that's not speaking for everyone else, is your business. You're looking ahead. You're looking at, well, we can do these kind of things, but they're tactics, and later on they will cause issues. So you'd rather not do them. But I was just trying to understand that not everyone's going to be using necessarily SalesBacker. They use other platforms as well. Mm-hmm. And it's just interesting to throw around the ideas like, asking for someone for a review is almost grey hat, isn't it? It's like turning your PPC in the red and dropping your price to stimulate sales is grey hat, but it's not. So it's always good to try and understand, where things lie, how far can we take them before they're considered light grey or dark grey before they move into black hat,
Yeah. I think it's, even just going back to the tweet you said, I think that, asking for a review in an email, and of course I would prefer it to be this way, that people can continue to do that. But I also think that it's also in Amazon's best interest, right? If you think back to like the incentivized review update, part of why they probably made that change is that they likely already knew it was a problem anyways. But then once all this, I think it was like 500,000 people saw that YouTube video, and then it was covered by lots of different news outlets that, hey, look, that these reviews on Amazon are biased, then that erodes customer trust in Amazon's reviews, which then makes people unable to decide, well, what should I buy? This one has a bunch of these incentivized reviews in there, so I don't know if it's actually a good product or not. And then they can't really trust the platform that they're buying from. So if you think about it from the shopper's perspective, and you think about it from what Amazon wants most of all, which is the customers to trust their platform, then I don't think that asking for a review in an unbiased way with a follow-up email is something they're get rid of, because on top of that as well, that helps them get more reviews, which then leads to more sales, as we know that if you have a lot more reviews on your listing, it's going to help you get better conversion rate, all else being equal, than if you have less reviews. And so it's sort of, it's in a way, it's something that helps Amazon. So I don't think that it'll go that way. But even just like the idea that you mentioned before about, lowering your price, putting as much PPC in and running it at a discount, I think that's really, really hard for them to really stop. And it can also be argued that, you're launching your product, and so you're doing like anything that any company would do, which is to discount it originally to try and get some foothold in the market. And so even that, I don't think that they would touch. It's more of like the stuff where if you think, wow, this is really, really clever, and then it's, okay, that might be something that they might go after in the future. But I don't know. I went down a bit of a tangent there, but yeah.
What about infographics? A lot of people put in attachments, trying to add value. I mean, some people write 60-page ebooks on pieces of plastic shipped from China, probably pointless half the time, and calling that premium. So where would you see where infographics, where PDFs come into play? Do they play a key role, or do you see a lot of people bastardizing that area? And you see where I'm coming from. It's like you can really go over the top. You've got these hair clips, and it's like, do you really need to write 30 pages on these hair clips? Are they that interesting? Give me some examples of the funny stuff that you've seen without naming, companies or whatever. And do you think it's worth the time and investment for people to invest in infographics and attachments like PDF?
So I think it's more about trying to get. You really want to make sure that your attachment, if you're going to do something, really fits what it is you're selling, right? So the example you gave of like some hair attachments or some hair thing, writing some ebook on hairstyles and different ways to do your hair, if depending on what you're selling, that actually could add some value. Yeah. Now I think if you're looking to do something where you put that into your actual shipment process, like into your actual box, I would probably avoid that because you can just do it digitally with an attachment and it's easier in that regard. Some of the most common that we'll see are really just plain like instruction manuals, or just like, here's the product and here's how you use it, like very simply. And then it's usually the approach of they'll take multiple images and then just describe steps of how to use your product and what you can do with it, et cetera. So it's kind of a boring example, right? That's the most common. Then beyond that, it's more like stuff that really fits what's being sold. So I give the example of like, if you're in the barbecue space, giving something like your favorite recipes, right? And those can be things where if you don't advertise them on the listing, but you instead include them in your first email, then it's a good way to kind of get that form of reciprocity to get in there, where you're like, hey, here's this additional thing, an additional bonus that it's our favorite 10 recipes. And you want to make it genuine, right? So if these are 10 recipes from your grandma, et cetera, something like that, then that actually can work well. If it's not really like that, then it can come across as disingenuous. But if you can use that, and that approach can work well in your first email, because it's setting them your future emails up to work well, because it's like, oh, hey, here's these guys again, and now they're asking for a review. This product was great. They sent me this extra valuable bonus, and so I'm going to go ahead and leave a review now. And so those types of things can work well. In terms of anything that I've seen I haven't really seen anything that's super bad that I can recall. I'm trying to think of any off the top of my head. Nothing that
I've kind of put you on the spot there, and it's not.
Yeah, no, that's
it's
fine.
not we're not here to abuse other people's companies and make light of them. But I think it's one of those things where it can get out of control. It's like I've actively seen, which I won't name, is that instead of the person working on making a better product, they were trying to add value by creating an ebook, which kind of defeats. Have a great product. The ebook's a bonus. It's a bit like PPC won't, you can't polish a turd. PPC won't save your product. It will enhance visibility. So that's the point I was coming from. So
yeah, and it's just to say something. I'll completely agree with that. Right. I think that a lot of times, and again, this usually comes back to people that are first getting started, is that they get concentrated on some of the tactics that they see, and they think that that's more important than the core, which is the product, right? And then so you kind of, this is like the phrase, you lose the forest for the trees or something like that. And so, yeah, I think that's really the main thing at stake, is making sure you actually create a really great product, because everything else that you do on top of that, it either really enhances it or it just detracts from it, or really doesn't add much value.
Yeah. Cool. And another thing I forgot to bring up as well is that, have you noticed that some of the key things I've seen with is that there are people out there that do not like to be marketed to, which is fair enough. Yeah. So like you've got people out there who despise email follow-ups. They want to, especially you see people on Reddit who's ready to kill someone for sending them a message. But what would you say in terms of the kind of customers out there? What should be the approach there? I think what I'm trying to say is that I'm not saying that everyone likes to be marketed to or dislikes, but I think what I'm trying to say is that you are not your customer, and customer comes in all shapes and sizes. Have you seen people get like crazily irate for being sent messages and threatening? And yeah,
so customers can opt out of those seller communications. So one of the things that we tell people when they get these responses, we have like a canned response in our support team where we show the seller steps on how someone can go into their account settings and then unsubscribe. So then you can basically apologize and say, by the way, if you don't want to receive any emails from sellers in the future, you can go in here and check this box and you won't receive them anymore. Yeah. And so then you're like, you're trying to apologize at the same time, but then also saying, here's how you can not have to be emailed in the future. And so then that's like a good way to say it, because in the past there wasn't really anything that people could do. It was just like they just would get the emails. So I think that was actually a positive update that Amazon did, because in that way it shows that they're okay with you sending emails, but they just want it to go to people that are okay with getting.
There's a filter in place that doesn't piss their customers unnecessarily.
Yeah, and you get rid of those. Yeah, and you get rid of those people that might be the really angry people. Yeah, they slowly get filtered out over time.
So another thing that we should really cover is that people go to the effort of setting up a sequence, but how do they test it? It's like, how do they know it's working? Because, some people could look at it, send out their first sequence and get a negative review, and then suddenly they want to change it instantly. So what would you suggest, like a hypothesis? Would you say to your customers, wait until you hit 100 or 50 units sold? How would you play it?
Yeah, so it's actually a really common thing that we get. And again, I guess I keep coming back to, I know that you have sellers of all shapes and sizes that watch, but this is something that we commonly see with people that are first starting. When they're first listing their product on Amazon, they'll come back to us in a month and they've sold maybe 50 units and they haven't really been able to be that successful on the marketing side. And then they're like, hey, I sold 50 units. Why don't I have, hundreds of reviews now? Not necessarily hundreds of reviews, but why don't I have more reviews? And it's like, okay, well, statistically, we'll see between, a very low single-digit percentage and then maybe a high single-digit percentage of people that will actually leave a review from sellers that have contacted us and just from looking at people, what they're doing. And so if you have only done 50 orders, and that's really only, you still need 100 just to even get to a sample size roughly large enough to get a sense of getting a handful of reviews even. Yeah. And so it's definitely something where you need like quite a bit of data over time. So I'd say, 30-day period, ideally even more than that, right? So we have a lot of sellers that are doing a lot more volume than that. And so the more data you get, the faster, the more you can make changes. But then inside like your dashboard, you can get a sense of inside SalesBacker. It'll show you like how many reviews you're getting, and it will show you with various time periods. And so once you get like, say after 30 days, you can maybe make a change and make a tweak to like, and maybe the subject lines of some of your emails or something along those lines to kind of test and see if you're going to get some different results. But definitely making sure you have more than enough data to do that. So I'd say several thousand units before you bother, because it's just not enough to really tell. And then so I'd just say that.
Cool. All right, so let's wrap up there and leave it on that point. Do you want to let people know how they can reach you? Just want to quickly say, guys, as well, is that I discovered Chris through his podcast a couple of years ago, and from my understanding, are you coming back with the podcast?
Yeah, it's paused right now, but just because, and maybe I'll look at the comments that you have underneath here, but I paused it for a bit because we were getting decent downloads, but I just felt like the conversations were really similar because, everyone's selling on Amazon. So it's like, oh, okay, I go and do this launch process. And it's always like a very similar thing that people are saying. And so I just kind of felt like it was harder to
find new conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So after 50 something episodes, it's like, I wasn't sure what else we could really add. Mm-hmm. And so, I paused it for a little bit and we may come back with it, but I don't know. I just,
if people want to discover it historically, where can they find it?
Yeah, so you can go to look at the podcast specifically. You can just go to sellercast.com, and that will redirect to our SalesBacker website, and then specifically a list of all the podcast episodes. So you can go back and listen to some of the guests. And maybe we could just do it with less frequency or something. I don't know. It's tough to say. I feel like you got to do it at least weekly, or it's not maybe enough frequency. But that's one thing. And then the company is just SalesBacker, so just salesbacker.com.
Cool. And if anyone's got questions for you, obviously this is a pre-record. People can then make comments below and you can answer those questions. But if someone wants to reach you for public speaking, consultancy, those kind of things, what's the best email or so to grab you on?
Yeah, just chris@salesbacker.com. So that's my direct email.
Thank you. All right. Thanks for coming in today, Chris. Guys, if you first time you tuned in to Seller Sessions, just hit the subscribe button below. I'd like to say thank you for spending time with us today. And again, Chris, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Danny.
No worries. See you later. Bye.
See you.